Live from parts unknown, you're listening to Simon Miller's Pro Wrestling Podcast, the only wrestling podcast on the planet, we think. Sit back, relax, prepare for positivity to run through your veins as Simon Miller gives you your weekly dose of powerful pro wrestling audio. It is Miller Time.
Hello and welcome to Simon Miller's Pro Wrestling Podcast. My name is Simon Miller and this is a Pro Wrestling Podcast. As you probably noticed, it is not Friday, the day that this goes up. But hey, you know how it is. Sometimes you've got to rearrange schedules and you've got to get some stuff done. A couple of the goalposts shifted around this week, so I made sure I shifted with them. But as long as you get 2 podcasts a week, I'm a happy man and hopefully you are happy too. If you've never listened to this podcast before, please do know it's all supported thanks to patreon.com/Simon Miller 316. And I would like just quickly to thank everyone that does support me on there, because as I always say, without that I wouldn't be able to do this, and I like doing this. It makes me happy. And one of the rewards on there, depending on which tier you go on it, is that you can actually come on Simon's Pro Wrestling Podcast, specifically this show, the second show of the week, and that's why I'm even more pleased to say that I have a guest joining me right now. His name is Dan Richards. Dan, how you doing, my friend?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
You're very welcome. Now, the best thing about all of this is that we have a lot of, we try and have one person on a week from the Patreon guy. As of late, there's been a load of guys just from around the world. And that absolutely blows my mind. Like, you're in the United States right now, we're just having a chat on a Saturday.
I'm in Canada, actually. I'm in
Canada? I got it wrong.
Yeah.
You're Nova Scotia, right? Is that right?
No.
I got it wrong again.
I'm in, just outside of Toronto.
Okay, I don't know what I'm talking about. I get confused. But does that mean you go to the Toronto shows as well? Do you able to get down to those?
Some of them, yes.
Because you know that WWE thinks that you're all bizarre, right? You're aware of this. You're part of Bizarro World.
Yes. This is Bizarro World. I didn't go to the most recent RAW and SmackDown.
Yeah.
But I went to the one previous, and then I've been to the NXT shows that have come local. So I'm kind of big into the NXT stuff. So, and then SummerSlam is coming next year.
Well,
so
I was going to say, yeah, that's like the biggest show for a while. But what was the biggest show before next year's SummerSlam?
Survivor Series.
Was that last year? Who was that? What was that? Was that 2017? Was that?
It might have even been 2016.
I'm going to look it up. I'm just intrigued.
I didn't go to Survivor Series, but I did go to the NXT show before that.
Right. Okay.
And that was the Asuka versus Mickie James and DIY versus the Revival 2 out of 3 match. Right.
So which many consider to be the best modern day WWE tag team match. So that's not a bad thing to see.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. So, yeah, if you watch the beginning of that show and you see like this, there's like a gold glorious row. That's us. That's
nice.
Myself.
I like
my son and a bunch of people out there. So
that is the weekend where Goldberg defeated Brock Lesnar. It's that weekend. Where the hell that went, I don't even know. But my word. And I'm just going to get the NXT show up now because I want to see what was on it other than the matches you've just seen. Because I imagine you did see a very, very good card. Because it was
Bobby Roode versus Ty Dillinger.
Yeah, before Ty Dillinger,
and then it was the end of. It was the end of the Dusty Rhodes Classic.
That's right, it was
with the shark cage and all that. And they did the cool spot off the cage,
of course,
where I think it was Thorne did the flip off the cage.
Yeah, see, I remember it in bits and pieces, and of course, I remember DIY versus the Revival, and I remember Samoa Joe and Nakamura more than I remember Asuka and Mickie James. I think that's more because that's when Samoa Joe won the championship. So I remember that happening. Mean, I know we're going back in time, but as far as I recall. You know, it was your classic NXT event with just a hotter crowd than usual, obviously, because, you know, when they do go to Toronto, fans are a lot louder. I mean, what memories do you have of that? And look, you mentioned you like NXT. I mean, I know the answer, but tell me, why NXT? Why is that your thing?
I mean, the wrestling's better. The storylines are tighter. And even like for live shows, we've gone to a couple of the house shows. And I've gone to a WWE house show. And I found the NXT house shows are actually better. They just have they feel like a more like an NXT show. Like the wrestling, I noticed the wrestling at the house show seemed to be a little bit watered down. It was like a lot of like multi-man matches.
Yeah,
people kind of just got in some of their stuff, but they didn't kind of bring up the level. But the NXT show felt like everybody was kind of trying real hard, and they get the crowd into it, and it's a smaller crowd too, so it was so that's why I like the NXT.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people do. I think that's kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, but there is a group of fans who I think mostly stick around with WWE now because of NXT. You know, that's kind of, you know, I think those same group of fans kind of hope that when, you know, Vince McMahon decides enough is enough, and who knows when, you know, when people say that, I think he's 72 now, maybe he's 73. I mean, knowing Vince McMahon, he's probably going to be around for another 15 years. So I don't think this day is coming anytime soon, but I do believe that there is a hope, or at least a want, that when Triple H takes over, maybe he brings that kind of brand of NXT wrestling to the main roster. And I think we'd see more of it. Like, I really do think there would be some sort of crossover, but I don't believe for a second that Raw is going to change drastically unless there is a decision made. I think if Raw ever changes drastically, it won't be because Vince McMahon has left. It will be because it's just time, much as it was during the Attitude Era. Because really, we're still, you know, the structure of the show is still basically the same as it was 20 years ago. I mean, I'm not saying it's negative. I'm just saying that it's a fact. And I think that's why when you watch NXT, which is under the WWE banner, and it is so different, I think that's why, I mean, it's booked differently as well. And I think it is booked for a quote-unquote smarter fan. But I think that's why people like it. And I completely understand why. And like you said, the takeover shows especially kind of smash it every time.
Yeah, the takeover shows smash it, and I think there's you don't get the overexposure you do in weekly Raw and SmackDown, where you see the same people week after week.
That's true. That's very, very
like the
true.
NXT. You'll see maybe our Gargano and Ciampa one week, and then you're not going to see them in ring for the next 2 or 3 weeks until that kind of that recording cycle's over.
That's
you might
true.
see a little vignette here and there, and it's just a little bit of hit this and that, but they drag out things a lot longer, so it feels fresher.
Yeah, I think that's the benefit of having 1 hour TV as well. Like we all rag on Raw. I know, look, Raw shouldn't be 3 hours. I don't, apart from, you know, USA executives that make a lot of ad revenue off of it. I don't think that anyone actually wants Raw at 3 hours. But it is 3 hours. But, you know, the benefit of having 1 hour TV is that even an average wrestling show over an hour, kind of, at the very least, is going to make you go, well, I'm satisfied. Because an hour is really quick with ad breaks. I know that the network doesn't really have ad breaks, but I mean, you know, with those kind of natural pauses, you know, an hour wrestling show just flies by, and it's so easy to watch. Which is why when they do those New Japan shows on Access in America, they just feel great because they're just short nuggets of goodness.
Yeah,
but I mean, I don't know. I one day I would like to see it somehow crossover, because obviously the thing would be maybe NXT makes it onto Fox Sports or something, or FS1, but I don't know how that's going to equate anyway. And it probably would hit the network a little bit. I imagine a lot of people, at least a lot of sort of hardcore fans, you know, one of their big reasons that they subscribe to the network is because of NXT. Like, I think it's one of those programs that may not do massive numbers, but it certainly does consistent numbers and as a reason to stay signed up.
Yeah, and I wasn't one of the people who signed up for NXT. I signed up more for the pay-per-views, and NXT kind of dragged me in. So I started watching NXT just before the Toronto show. So I guess it would have been a Takeover Brooklyn, the one with Asuka and Bayley.
Yeah,
and to bring up that match in particular, that match got me interested in women's wrestling.
Oh wow! So that was like the catalyst.
Yeah, that was because I used to I almost even fast forwarded through that, because I think I recorded that one. It was like, because I was more from coming through the Attitude Era and all that, and the Divas. It's like it was all like just titillation, and I didn't really care. It was just. Yeah, it's like, okay, I can see that other places the wrestling was boring. It wasn't very good. So you just it was like fast forward through this.
Yeah, of course.
There's nothing interesting is going to happen. But I watched that and went, oh my God, like this is this is legit now. They're actually wrestling. They're actually and it was good. It was really good. That was a incredible match.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those, you know, if you kind of follow the evolution, pardon my wording, from like Sasha Banks, Bayley, Asuka, Ember Moon, I'd put in there as well, Charlotte, you know, Paige too, you know, all of those, you know, women down in NXT kind of. I think they rewrote the rule book for WWE, and then obviously it slowly made its way onto the main roster.
Yeah,
but, it took a long while. So, and also because, you know, it's that classic boy who cried wolf. Because you've been presented with that for so long, of course you're going to see a women's match and go, well, I don't need to watch this. What's the point? I know what I'm going to get. And If you don't like it, which, a lot of people didn't, then yeah, there is no reason to tune in. But I think that's a really interesting point, because that goes to show how important NXT can be, because it completely rewrote kind of your brain about what to expect from, we'll call it non-male wrestling, I guess, because WWE predominantly has always been that focused.
Yeah. Yeah, as far as actual, like, legitimate wrestling matches, it was all male. And then the females would do like bikini contests and pudding matches and all kinds of like just
roll around
nonsense.
To this day, I watch a lot of the Attitude Era stuff now for work and my own personal times. And honestly, some of the stuff you see, and not just with the women, but with a lot of stuff, it's just unbelievable. And you kind of watch it now, and I don't know, maybe it's because you can never appreciate any time period without actually being in that time period. I mean, Dave Meltzer summed this up the best, where he goes, it doesn't matter what kind of star ratings I gave to a match in 1975, because I can't go back and watch it under the guise of 1975, because it's not 1975. And so much has changed. That's what your brain does. It's like video games, right? If you go back and play an N64 game now, all those things that you thought ran really smoothly, they don't. They run like they barely work, because we're used to smoother frame rates. And it's the same with wrestling as well. However, obviously, the glorious of wrestling is that you can rewrite those rules, but you just have to be aware of it. So it sounds like you've been watching wrestling a while. I mean, how long have you been watching it? And as always, my favourite question, what got you into it?
I've been watching wrestling for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, I know that feeling. It's both good and bad.
I did send you. So the first live match that I went to was Abdullah the Butcher.
Oh, right. So we're going way back in time.
In a cage, and this would have been the probably the late 70s.
Wow, nice, dude. I like it. Retro content.
Yeah. So, I don't even know how old I was, but I wasn't old enough to see an Abdullah the Butcher match. So,
yeah, I don't think anybody is, man.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure who the opponent was. I think just looking back now, it might have been the original Sheik, because I think they were feuding. They were kind of doing the tour around that time.
Yeah.
They kind of went town to town and just carved each other up, literally.
That's what they did.
Cage match, and that's basically the only thing I remember from that show, is kind of seeing a guy's face against the cage and a steel fork or whatever. It was.
Wrestling is so weird.
Yeah.
What show was it? Was that NWA? No, what would it have been? What show would it have been?
Oh, it was probably just it might have even been pushed by a local.
Okay, right.
Local group. Yeah. So after that, like as I got older, so in 10, 11, 12, they used to have with the city I lived in. I used to live in Sudbury, which is about 4 hours north of here. We used to have a wrestling show every month that would come through live. And it was based on this TV show called International Wrestling. And it was, I think they were out of Montreal. And it might have been the Burritos, or it could have been the Rougeos who ran that particular territory.
Yeah.
But like some of the names that we used to see is like the Rougeau brothers. So Jacques, Raymond, Armand, who you may or may not even know.
I know about Armand, yeah. Mostly, not at the time, I certainly didn't, but it's mostly through going through archives and just, researching footage and stuff like that. You just come across this stuff.
Right. And there was like Dino Bravo, Rick Martel, Tom Zink.
Tom Zink, who was meant to be the second coming, but never lived up to his potential.
The drop kick. He used to do the drop kick off so he'd have the guy on his shoulders and he'd drop kick that guy. Like standing, not like a missile drop kick, a standing drop kick off another guy's shoulders, so like in the electric chair. It's just unbelievable. So that was kind of the core group of our local wrestling show. So we used to see them like every month.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty cool way to get into it.
Yeah, so that was I guess just as the 80s wrestling boom started. So that was like the mid to late 80s, I guess, from about like 85 to about 88.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
So
those guys were kind of AWA. Some of the guys that come from and kind of cross over between the two. But yeah.
So during that time as well, obviously, you're seeing the rise of the WWF. I mean, that is when it all, started to kick off, really. I know there were things going on before then. So, what's your opinion when you kind of... I mean, I use these words, but obviously they're not necessarily the right words to use. But you're seeing the death of the territories, and you're seeing WWF rise with Hulk Hogan and WrestleMania. I mean, as a wrestling fan who's obviously grown up with, the quote-unquote, smoky venues and all that nonsense. Like, do you think they're crazy? Do you believe in what they're doing? Do you want to watch it? Do you have access to it? Like, how does it... Because I imagine that Toronto, or around the area, or even where you were sort of 4 hours up the road, there's always been somewhat of a good area for WWE, or at least a popular one.
Well, Toronto used to have WWE at the Maple Leaf Gardens.
Yeah.
It was a huge stop for them. But I never came down, and like WWF at the time was kind of, as a kid, I remember WWF being the fake stuff, but the stuff I was watching was the real stuff.
Loads of people say that. It's fascinating. Yeah. That's the best thing about having these conversations with people that actually got to experience it, because now, quote unquote, it's all fake. But there was a time where it's like, oh no, that's that WWF stuff. No one cares. I love it. I love that. That was the perception of everything.
Yeah, that was our perception as kids, and like the Road Warriors were absolutely huge at that point. They came just one time. They came to the Sudbury Arena and sold the place out.
Amazing.
And they didn't even have a match. They ended up showing up late, no makeup, and just came up, beat up the heels, cheered, and everybody went home happy. It was like 3 minutes long.
Did they get a Road Warrior pop?
Oh yeah, they got it like huge, because it basically came over the sound system that they couldn't make it, blah blah blah, and then so the heels were in the ring and some other faces came out to kind of confront them, and then they were getting beat up, and then the Road Warriors came and made the save, and the crowd went crazy. So I don't know if that was kind of planned or if it was one of those things where they actually didn't show up on time and they just kind of booked us on the fly. No idea, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah. So when this kind of focuses. So when you hear about WrestleMania, the shows the show to I don't know, to take over all shows. Like, do you think that Vince McMahon is crazy? I mean, because at the time it wasn't like people weren't doing big shows. Like Starrcade. 1982, I think Starrcade 1 or whatever you want to call it happened, and that was always considered a big deal. Was it that? Or am I going too early? I can't remember when the hell first Starrcade was.
Yeah, so Starrcade was 83.
83,
and
right, okay.
I was about 10, but so the NWA up here was non-existent in Canada. So the only thing I knew about Ric Flair is what I read in, like, I guess what you'd call the aftermags.
Oh, we used to get a few over here as well, which was nuts now looking back. How they ever made it over here, I don't know. But hidden away in W.H. Smith, which is a tiny, tiny shop in terms of, I mean, speaking in the UK, but it's never really, it's just, you could find aftermags hidden away, which I always found fascinating.
Yeah, so that was our exposure to NWA. So, and they would have their ratings and whatever, and Ric Flair was always number one, and Hogan was always number two.
Of course.
And it's like, I don't know who this Ric Flair person really is. So, like, because I know who he is based on the picture, but I've never actually seen him do anything until he showed up in '91 on WWE TV. But yeah, like the WCW and NWA didn't really come up here too much until like kind of the mid '90s. Probably Nitro was when they broke through and came onto proper cable here.
And so what's your first? I mean, we're going off a bit off piece, but that's why I like these conversations, because they just bring up so many fascinating points. But so you're a WWF guy, really? If in terms of the WWF versus WCW, then Nitro breaks onto the television, and obviously from '96 to pretty much for a couple of years, it's great and everybody loves it. And I've always said this. I've always been a WWE guy, but even I attest to, hearing about things that are happening on WCW and in ad breaks on Raw, jumping over to Nitro and struggling to turn back because I'm like, well, what's going to happen? And that's why wrestling was so much to be a fan. But it's kind of different over here because England was definitely a WW. Maybe it wasn't so much because WWE was on Sky, whereas WCW was on sort of terrestrial TV, which anybody could get. So when eventually it does seep into Canada, how do you respond to it? Do you like the change, or is it just kind of a bit like a whirlwind?
It was on 2 different days.
Oh, really?
So we got
you lucky man.
So we got the Raw show on Monday, and I think WCW was on like Wednesday.
That's bizarre. So it was taped and then aired live a few days later. What is that about?
Yeah, so we didn't see the head-to-head live during that time.
So did you watch both then? Did you just watch both casually? You're like, I don't care, man.
Yeah, so
That's great.
Yeah, so I kind of took a wrestling break probably after Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, the first, like the WrestleMania match.
Yeah.
I was probably like didn't watch as much TV until kind of Nitro came on. Not Nitro, Thunder started.
Oh man,
Nobody
watched that.
Yeah, I used to work on in a taxi company. So, and I was going to college. So, in doing that, I was staying up all night, and then Thunder was on Sunday nights on some channel. So I'd watch 2 hours of Thunder because I couldn't sleep, and it was on at like midnight or something, or 11 o'clock at night. And it was just, so I was kind of following it. That's kind of where I came back in. I started following it there, and then following some of the websites and stuff like that.
So why did you stop after Shawn Brett, and why did you come back? I mean, what was the you just done with wrestling? Just needed a break?
No, I think around that time I moved out of my parents' house, so I didn't have cable. So it wasn't like it wasn't like, oh, this sucks and I'm not interested. Even though it kind of mid-90s WWE kind of sucked, but
it did. No, it did. I think everyone had to have an occupation. It was the weirdest thing. You're not allowed to be a wrestler unless you had a job on the side. It made no sense whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, the money they made, they didn't need extra jobs.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
That would have made more sense in the 70s when the guys probably weren't paid as well.
Yeah, but
have a second job.
It just made no sense. So was it kind of just you got the itch again, and you're like, man, I really want to watch wrestling again?
Well, yeah. Then Thunder was on a channel that I had, so I started following it that way, and then I started looking on the internet and following some of the online websites and kind of seeing what was going on, and then I eventually got like TSN back, so then I started watching Raw. I think the Raw I came back on was just the post WrestleMania 14.
Oh wow! So basically, the rise of Stone Cold Steve, well, not even the rise, the crowning of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Just the crowning and the flip over for DX, and I remember I may have watched some stuff kind of previous and in and out, but it wasn't like every day. And then around that time when I'd come home, I was doing some work and stuff, and WCW was on Wednesdays, and I think it started like 4, 5 in the afternoon or something on Wednesdays. I used to rush home to watch Nitro because I was like really into Nitro and stuff at that time. So I was watching both shows. Yeah. And like that was kind of during the rise of Goldberg. I loved Goldberg back in the day.
Oh man, me too. I mean, I don't know how you could. I know I'm pretty on a sort of tangent as well. That's why I can't understand so many people these days. Like when say Asuka, she comes onto the main roster, or somebody new joins. And so many people say, well, they can't just come on and beat everybody. That wouldn't work. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, one of the best pushes and best arrivals in history was a guy that I think even he himself, my dad, obviously, would come out and say, I wasn't the best worker in the world. I wasn't the best wrestler in the world, but I had an idea that was, put all the weight in the world behind, and it worked. And that's what I never understand. Like, especially when Asuka came up to the main roster and she was kind of booked, she was the heel... the face that had to, sell for the heel a bit. And everyone's like, well, that's how it has to be. And I was like, no, it's not. If you want her to come in and just run through everyone, I tell you, she's going to get over well quickly, because I saw it happen in the late 90s, and it's still one of the best things I've ever seen. It made me want to watch him, and it made me think that is one cool-ass man.
Yeah. He used to just come out, kick somebody's ass, and leave. It was like, it was really great. And my favorite Asuka was towards the end of her NXT run, when she was getting close to getting beat, but she'd managed to pull it out, and she was like cocky Asuka.
Yeah, I tell you, definitely.
I'm the champion, and she just throw it in your face, and it's like, I love Asuka, but I so want you to get your ass kicked.
Exactly, but
that's what needs to build to.
And it was a good evolution of that character too, because she was that good. It's kind of like what they're doing with Johnny Gargano with NXT, but in reverse. Like, he made so many mistakes, now the crowd has started to turn on him in a completely organic way. I hate that word, but it works. It was the same. It was the same with Asuka as well. It's like, well, she's gotten so good, of course she's going to get a bit arrogant, because she's. How would you not? Do you know what I mean? In that environment, she's beating everybody. No one can beat her. She wins matches really quickly. You know, of course she's going to get a bit of a chip on her shoulder. And I like that kind of character development. I think that, to me, is the good kind of shades of grey. As opposed to this, we don't know how to book people to get booed or cheered, so we'll just call it shades of grey. That's true shades of grey, where you see a character evolve and change and make a difference. So, I mean, I'm getting the idea that you really enjoy the Attitude Era, as a lot of us did. But I have talked to a lot of people that sort of grew up on what were called old school wrestling, for lack of a better term. It's a terrible term. Who struggled with the Attitude Era because obviously all the rules went out the window. Matches were just slugfests. You know, you had a character that was a porn star. Like it took the idea of what wrestling was and basically said, well, let's just go nuts with it. And that, to many, much like we're experiencing today, right? As Joey Ryan comes out with penis druids. A lot of people are like, Jim Cornette is one, who's like, I cannot accept what pro wrestling has become because it's not what I grew up on and it's not what I want to see. But it kind of sounds like you were cool with the Attitude Era.
Oh, yeah. I was cool with the Attitude Era. And I think a lot of that with, especially with WWE, that the main event scene were the best wrestlers in the company as well. I can't think of too many outside of, like, so you had Stone Cold, you had The Rock, you had Triple H a little bit later, and then you had The Undertaker. That would be kind of the core four guys. Mick Foley would be the fifth. Like, who else on that roster was the person that people were clamoring for that should have been a main eventer?
No, you're right, man. You're right. I think what WWE did really well, it's been said before, like, and I totally agree with a lot of the criticisms that have been thrown against him. But Vince Russo's, greatest asset to WWE during that time was making sure that everybody had a story. And because everybody had a story, I have great memories of Val Venus, D'Lo Brown, Mark Henry, Road Dogg, Billy Gunn, The Godfather. Do you know what I mean? All of them, because they were all involved in something. But really, if you took that away from them, you're 100% correct. Whereas if you looked across the other way, maybe they had a better array or a better pool of talent, right? Like their wrestlers were better sort of man for man.
I would say, but WCW's best wrestlers were all mid-card guys.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't have a Stone Cold. They didn't have a Rock, or at least not one that was evolving at that time. Like, because again, we're going over our ground here, but I think it's worth saying because Hulk Hogan was a draw. Of course he was. He's Hulk Hogan, but we should have been moving him to one side and building everything else, and we didn't.
Right.
So that is, I mean, that really is WCW's worst problem, especially now when you look back, is that they brought in all these guys that were absolutely stars. Macho Man, Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, all these dudes, and yet nothing changed in like 5 years at the company, which is absolute. The Roman Reigns things now, which we're going to talk about, but the Roman Reigns thing now is kind of similar to that, but that's an anomaly within it itself because at least he was brought in as a star. This would be the equivalent of like Triple H still being on top now, but that's a whole nother conversation we don't need to get into.
Yeah, no, and like when you talk about old school. And what I remember watching growing up, because it was like Saturday wrestling shows and all that. Like, so I watched AWA and what we call our international wrestling. So they had a certain feel to it. And when ECW broke through on TNN, and I watched that first show, that was a nostalgia kick for me. That was like, that's what I used to watch. It was like not as slick as WCW and in WWE. The wrestling was amazing. That first TNA show just blew me away. And then so I got into ECW as well at that time. And unfortunately I was close to the end, but it was still pretty good stuff. So like the Rob Van Dam Jerry Lynn match, that was amazing. It was like the best thing I'd seen in forever. Oh
man, yeah. I mean, I remember when I saw Jerry Lynn stood in the ring for All In last week. I remember thinking to myself, he was 10 years too early. Like if he was doing what he was doing, back then now, I think he would have been one of the, guys at the forefront of all of it because he really was, pivotal in, not I'm going to say perfecting that style, but certainly advertising that style and being a proponent of that style. And like you say, a lot of the stuff he did in ECW, a lot of stuff, if you take away the violence and the hardcore nature, and a lot of it is hard to watch today, but there are some superb matches in ECW. And I was actually listening to I can't remember, it was a podcast or an interview the other day where, there was a big conversation in the late 90s about, is wrestling oversaturated? I think it was just when SmackDown was about to start. And Paul Heyman was all like, well, it's not saturated for me because I concentrate on my in-ring product, whereas those other guys are focusing on all these other things. I think there is a certain truth to that. Like, once WWE and WCW started borrowing or stealing, which we look at it, what ECW's USP was, they did start focusing on what the in-ring product, and then that just evolved into what we have today, really. And that just kind of goes, it's weird, like WWE is the last one standing, but Nitro kind of wrote the rules for what we expect from our weekly TV shows today. ECW kind of wrote the feel, and WWE succeeded. I mean, it's a fascinating story from top to bottom.
Yeah. You borrow from this guy, you borrow from that guy, you put in a little bit of your own pizzazz, and that's what you end up with.
Yeah, no.
So I think the in-ring product right now at like the talent level is probably as good as it's been in the last 15 years.
Yeah, I think it's better. I think within WWE, and I know there's been a change sort of outside of WWE which has influenced that, but yeah, I can't remember a time when a roster, man for man again, there's that term again, but it's true, has been this good. In the sense that you can put Seth Rollins out there with pretty much 90% of the roster and he'll have a pretty damn good match. Whereas, 15, 20 years ago, that wouldn't necessarily have been the case.
Yeah, I would say it's comparable to like 2002, 2003, when the Radicals came over and then WCW came over, and they kind of had this real overflow of talent, of like really good wrestlers then. And and to say that today is probably better, I guess if I went back and looked, today is probably better, top to bottom.
Yeah, like
the individual skills that these guys have today compared to that.
I think so. Yeah. I think especially because, again, Roman Reigns, our friend, he's not a bad professional wrestler, by any sense of the imagination.
He's actually really good.
Yeah, but he is. But back in the day, the reason a lot of people turned on Hulk Hogan was because he did the same shtick. Now, Roman Reigns does the same shtick in the sense that all wrestlers do the same shtick, but people don't like him because of the atmosphere around him, not because of what he brings to the table as a professional wrestler necessarily. If he was in a different position, I don't think anybody would mind him at all. And that kind of represents a shift in thoughts as well, because, when guys used to get pushed at the top of the card that the fans didn't think deserved it, it was because they were rubbish. That was the grief. So this guy can't do a good match. So what are we doing here? Roman Reigns has proven he can do a good match, and yet it's just fascinating, like especially for someone like yourself that has seen 30 years plus of professional wrestling. And what do you think of today's product? Obviously, we mentioned the in-ring talent, but what do you think of today's product in the sense that there's 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown, a pay-per-view that now really, if we're being honest, is not as important as it used to be? Raw and SmackDown are the golden gooses because they're the things that make all the money. And the WWE Network, while I respect it massively, what they've tried to do, it still feels to me like a safety net. Like we haven't got there with streaming yet. I think we will one day, and then WWE will prosper because they've taken all the steps now, and they'll be in the right place if that does explode. I mean, you never know, but it certainly seems like it will. But because of that, pay-per-views and main events are almost just ways to get you enticed to watch Raw again. And that is obviously completely backwards to what we were used to in the past.
Yeah, the only thing is that on TV you generally don't see title changes on especially the big titles.
Yes, that's true. That's very true.
So they do build to the big matches on the pay-per-views. But yeah, I see the weekly television being kind of the driver of everything. I've been thinking about this, and I think that because you got so much talent that's even not being used, and they've got so much TV time, and there's still lots of guys who and the girls who don't get on TV. It's like I don't know if they can start. Instead of building to a single pay-per-view, you kind of build stories over time, and it culminates at whatever pay-per-view it makes sense. So instead of building just to Hell in a Cell this weekend for 3 weeks, you're building other. And they're kind of doing it with the Triple H Undertaker thing, where they're building to that super show simultaneously.
Yeah, that is something I always still find weird. Because it used to be so focused, right?
Yeah.
It used to be right. We're building to this, but now we've got the Australian show, we've got Hell in a Cell, which we'll talk about in one sec. What the hell else is going? There was something else they put. Oh God, we got the Mae Young Classic. They've also got the
Evolution.
Exactly, Evolution, the Saudi Arabia show, which I know is kind of not really in there, but you still hear a lot about it, so it still counts. It still, takes up a part of your brain that maybe you hadn't reserved for wrestling stuff. So yeah, we live in that world, right? We live in a social media world where they want to just chuck as much stuff as possible and hope some of it sticks.
Right.
And then we mentioned Hell in the Cell as well, and you'd mentioned beforehand that you wanted to talk about blood and chair shots in WWE, and how that ties into a pay-per-view like Hell in the Cell. And I thought that was really fascinating because that's a conversation that comes up a lot as well. How do you pull off a Hell in the Cell match? Because my favourite Hell in the Cell match, I mean, the one that I'll always show people is the Mankind Undertaker one, but my favourite is Undertaker and Shawn Michaels from Bad Blood, 1997. Because I just think in terms of a wrestling match, that was just amazing, whereas Foley Taker is more like a car crash. An amazing car crash, but a car crash. But, every single one of them had blood and chair shots. Every one. And now, I think, look, don't get me wrong, I'm the first to say that the health of wrestlers is my most important thing. To the point, and I get a lot of heat for this online, I don't care. I don't even mind if they want to stop matches halfway through. If it means that the wrestlers are okay, that's the most important thing to me. However, it's completely fair to say at the same time that I've never invested in a Hell in a Cell match as much since all that stuff went away, because really it's just another match with some metal around it. That's what a Hell in a Cell is.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the safety part. Like with especially like head chair shots, I just find that the chair shots now don't make any sense in the context of the WWE universe. Okay, we'll call it in the universe, wrestling is a sport. It's a competitive thing. It's not within, if you take it, it's like in a Marvel movie or whatever. They're actually fighting. It's real in that context. So when you could take somebody's head and smash it into a turnbuckle and smash them into a ring post and all that, but when you pick up a chair, you have to wait till that guy turns around to hit him in the back. It kind of looks silly, and it doesn't make sense in the context of everything else that's going on. So I'd like them to kind of not do chair shots anymore, because it doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, I know what you mean. No, I think it's just because the problem is, if you've got a steel chair, why would you hit somebody in the back?
Yeah.
It's like, that's not what you would do.
If I'm going to get disqualified and I just hate that person, why just wallop them right in the face?
Exactly, because that's what you do. Yeah, exactly.
In the context of that sport, as opposed to, in reality, we know why headshots are just a really bad idea, and it kind of the same thing with the whole blood thing. It's because they're going to build up Hell in a Cell as it tears flesh and it's unforgiving and all that stuff, but what actually happens in the Hell in a Cells now is none of that stuff. No. So I'd almost like to see like Hell in a Cell go away, Extreme Rules go away. Like that kind of stuff just doesn't make sense anymore, because you can't deliver on the things that you're promoting. And I don't want to see wrestlers carve their faces up just to entertain me and that kind of thing. Like I get sometimes that blood brings up the, like, Stone Cold Steve Austin Bret Hart match without the blood. Still a great match, but that image isn't plastered on TV 20 years later.
No, absolutely not. No, yeah. I think the biggest problem I have with all that stuff today, I say problem, I can live with it, like it doesn't bother me too much, but is the fact that we have a pay-per-view called Hell in a Cell. I mean,
right.
that is so preposterous in terms of storytelling within wrestling. Because obviously, again, we mentioned two matches. The whole reason Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker were locked in a cell is because Shawn Michaels kept finding ways out to screw over The Undertaker. So Undertaker went, all right, well, now I'm going to put you in a big cell. You can't screw me over. You were trapped. That was the point. And it was the same with, loads of ones I can think of. The cell was there to keep two people in, and that did get watered down over the years. Of course it did. But the problem today is that it's an event. So you know that 4 to 6 weeks before that, something is going to happen to try and build to a Hell in a Cell match, because you're actively told. And that, I don't mind Jeff Hardy versus Randy Orton in a Hell in a Cell, because, again, I think Jeff Hardy has always wanted that match, and I think that he'll do well in that match, and and all these kind of things. But it does take something away from it when you already know. It just does.
Yeah.
It just really, really does. For better or worse, and I'll be the first to admit that maybe that's getting a bit too finicky with wrestling. But sometimes when, people promoting wrestling matches get too finicky, it makes it better. Because that's just how life works. If other people take it seriously, so will I.
Well, but this year's Hell in a Cell, it looks like they're building to potentially 4 Hell in a Cell matches. Becky Charlotte could go in Hell in a Cell. It makes sense.
Yep.
AJ Styles and Samoa Joe.
Yep.
Makes perfect sense in a cell. And so does Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman.
Yeah, because the Shield have kept attacking, and now you've got Drew McIntyre and Dolph Ziggler as a problem.
Yeah. So I want to segue into something on that, and I think it's a booking thing. So when we get the heels, I think the way that the heels are booked now is not based on what they do; it's based on who they do it to. So the only reason Braun Strowman's a heel is because he and Ziggler and they attack Roman Reigns. So Roman Reigns is a good guy. So whatever the bad guy does against Roman Reigns is, even though they're completely justified, because the Shield attacked Braun Strowman the week before. How is he not the good guy?
I've been asking myself this for 2 weeks. All Braun Strowman did is go, I need some backup. And apparently that makes him a bad guy. And the thing I hate about heel, sorry, I'll let you get back in a minute, but just quickly, the thing I hate about heel turns the most is as soon as you turn someone heel, they have to insult the fans. It's so ridiculous. You don't need to do that every time. Like, if there's a reason to do it, like The Rock did, made perfect sense because they were telling him to go die. That made sense. But now it's almost a prerequisite. Oh, I've turned heel, therefore I'll say back. I hate all that. I think it's ridiculous. Anyway, you go on your point.
Yeah, Becky Lynch Charlotte is the same thing. The only reason Becky Lynch is pushed as a heel is because she attacked Charlotte, who was supposed to be the face, even though Charlotte did all the kind of put herself into the SummerSlam match she didn't belong in. And Becky's completely justified in everything that she's done. And probably that's why she's getting the big cheers. It's because there's no reason to boo her. She didn't do anything wrong as a heel. And the heels used to do the bad things. Now it just it matters who they do it to, not what they actually do.
Yeah, you're right. No, you're 100% right, and it's a bizarre way to be.
Yeah.
In terms of what the stories that we're trying to tell and all that kind of stuff. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a different era. I don't know. But it certainly doesn't work. It certainly doesn't maybe work as well as it once did.
Same thing. It goes back to even like Shane and Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. I don't see how Shane was the good guy in that, other than Shane's supposed to be the good guy, because he was doing all the bad stuff to these guys who you should start feeling sympathy for Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. It should have been the other way around.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the whole shades of grey thing. I think that they try and push, but I don't necessarily think it works as well as they hope it would.
Right.
And on this topic as well, because I know you wanted to mention this as well, and I think it all ties in. It's because I would say wrestling is so open these days, and it's such just like an open book, and we all know what's going on, and fans aren't really happy to just go along with what they're being sold anymore, which certainly was the point at one time. Like, you would be told this is the good guy, the bad guy, and fans would cheer or boo, depending on that. But now the fans, I think, or at least at some shows, see themselves as part of it. And they will say whatever they want. They'll do whatever you want. And as you mentioned to me before we started recording, the hijacking of shows is something that can be a problem in modern day pro wrestling, because I think my biggest worry with it is if you're a brand new watcher of pro wrestling, and it's hard enough to get into it today anyway. Like, I always think this when I watch WWE, they don't necessarily do a great job in letting you know what's going on, or they don't find the balance between not insulting people that have been watching it a long time, but also ensuring they're catering for people that haven't been watching it. So if you get in, all of a sudden you hear CM Punk chants, for example, well, then you've got a whole work. Like, well, who is CM Punk? He's not in the ring. Imagine, if you've got someone next to you, great, they can explain it. But otherwise, who is CM Punk? Then you've got to go look up CM Punk. Then you've got reams of stuff to go through. Then you're going to find out something about a lawsuit. And you're probably just going to go, well, screw this. This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. And yet it's something that I don't hate entirely. Because again, I totally agree with the fact, if you've paid your money for a ticket and you want to go down there and say whatever you want, I don't see how anyone can argue that's not fine. It may not make for a good atmosphere, and it may not hate the product, and it may not help the entertaining side of things, but I still don't think it's wrong, if that makes sense. I dislike it, but I don't think it's wrong.
Yeah, well, I think it's a little bit of disrespect to the other people watching, because not everybody's participating, and not everybody, like, some people are buying Roman Reigns stuff. He's the highest seller in the company, so
well,
I mean, there's fans out there for this person. So
yeah, and I would say that as much as people don't like hearing it, I mean, Roman Reigns does sell more merchandise than Bullet Club merchandise. That's just a fact. Like, yeah, it's just true. But I get it. Yes, you can say yes, but he's on a bigger stage. Yeah, but it's still true. So it's like, you know, there you go.
I thought it was funny when you mentioned on the from the All In show that everybody did the thing when Colt Cabana.
Everybody.
Like, you guys are the worst.
Yeah, I mean that again. You do whatever you want, but that made me go, really? Like, are you kidding me? But hey, that's wrestling, man. That's why it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But I mean, what would you do though? I mean, do you think there's a way to? We'll call it hijacking shows. Do you think there's a way to stop that? Because I don't really think there is.
There's. I know how I do it. I handle it at home. I turn the volume off.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So I watched Roman Reigns, Bobby Lashley. I just turned the volume off. It was a good match, but I just couldn't take it anymore. It's like people doing the wave and all that. It's like, come on. Like, I get it. You're upset, but it's still pretty good wrestling. This isn't like Hogan, Kevin Nash having a terrible match in the late '90s.
No, I mean it's completely different to that, really, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. The whole thing is, it's fascinating to me. Like, I do find it fascinating. I always call it a science experiment in the sense that I think one day we're going to look back on all of this and just be amazed by sort of the shift that we've gone through. In many ways, it's a bit like when TVs went from standard definition to HD definition, and ever since HD, people keep trying to iterate on it, but realize they can't because the jump to HD was too much. You know, 4K, HD to 4K wasn't the same, and the whole 3D revolution wasn't the same. I don't know. I think this just this is just the format of professional wrestling for now.
Yeah, I think so. I've got Brad here, and since we're talking about Roman Reigns, do you want to talk to him for a couple of minutes?
I absolutely do. And just for people listening,
perspective?
Brad is Dan's 10-year-old son, and Dan has been kind enough to say we could talk to him.
I'm on.
Hey, Brad, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Well, look, firstly, I want to thank you very much for your time coming on Simon Miller's Pro Wrestling Podcast. Now, the reason I wanted to talk to you is because, I mean, you watch professional wrestling, correct?
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes. That's the best answer ever. But you do. And I would like your perspective, or how do you feel about Roman Reigns? Because as I'm sure you know, Roman Reigns gets treated very meanly by a lot of the adult audience of the crowd. But as I've always said, wrestling is really aimed at more people like your good self. So, Roman Reigns, are you a fan? Do you like him? Do you not like him? What do you think of the man?
I sort of like him. I don't hate him. Sometimes I just don't like the actions he does.
In what sense? What does he do that you don't like?
A lot of things.
So who do you like on the roster then? When you sit down to watch Raw or SmackDown, who are the people that stand out for you? And, who do you want to cheer for? Who do you want to see do well?
I like Brock Lesnar.
He's
pretty good.
You're my favorite person ever, Brad. What is it because of the way he looks? Or why does Brock Lesnar get you? Do you like how big he is?
Sort of.
Do you like how he destroys people? He's strong, exactly. Is he someone that you look at and go, I'd like to be like that one day?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. I like you, Brad, because this is how I used to be when I watched wrestling as a kid. I used to look up to the guys that look big and monstrous. I'd like to be that one day. And I would guess that Brock Lesnar, what about people like Braun Strowman, for example? He's a big dude. How do you feel about Braun Strowman?
Scary.
See, this is good. These are the things. So would you, if you went to a wrestling event live, would you cheer Braun Strowman or would you boo him?
I would boo him.
Nice. And that's because you're scared of him, right? So you want him to lose.
Yeah.
I like this, Brad. Who is your favorite wrestler ever?
Finn Balor.
I knew you were going to say that. Obviously, that goes against do you just like the way he looks? Do you like his face? Do you just think he's a nice guy?
I like the demon.
The demon.
But-
Do you get a bit upset that WWE doesn't really allow him to be the demon all the time?
Yeah, a little.
Yeah, it sucks, doesn't it? It'd be much better if he was because the demon is more interesting. No offense to Finn Balor, but the demon is more interesting, right?
Yeah.
I agree. Well, thank you very much for your time, Brad. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'll talk to your dad again for a little bit.
I'm back.
That was brilliant, dude. That was brilliant.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy. Like when you hear, I don't like Braun Strowman because I'm scared of him. I like Brock Lesnar because he's really big. And I like Finn Balor because sometimes he's the demon. That's all you need. That's all. That's wrestling. And don't get me wrong. I completely understand that there's a community and a I can't think of the right word, but it's fun to moan about wrestling. I completely understand that. But I think sometimes we do go a bit too over the line because as Brad has just proven there, sometimes it's just about feeling it, man. You feel it and you enjoy it. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. It brings you back to when you were a kid and why you got into it in the first place.
Exactly.
Whenever you did.
Because only a few people, and there's no right or wrong, but only a few people start watching it. Other way around. Only a few people, more people get into wrestling when they're a kid than not. It's rare. I know a few people that got into it as adults, but even then, they remember it from their childhood, and I think that's why it's so fun.
Right.
Right, so
for sure.
The one last thing we need to talk about, Dan, before I let
Sure.
you go. Now, I always have a little chat with my patrons before we go on. We get some ideas down and we shoot. We kind of figure out what we want to talk about. And you have mentioned the love of my life, Rusev, and you told me you have a different take on him.
Yes.
I would like to know this take, and I'm very excited to have this discussion with you.
Okay, so as a premise, I love Rusev. I think he's funny. I think he can do face heel, all that stuff. I think where you and I differ, I think, is when the whole Rusev Days thing started, and it started getting over with the crowd. He was supposed to still be a heel.
Yes,
and he was going out. And when the Rusev Days chant started, instead of doing the heel thing, covering his ears, or telling people to shut up, or this isn't sing along with the Rusev or something like that, he started doing the chest pump thing and pumping his encouraging it. And so, if you're writers in the back and trying to plan this show, and he's doing the opposite of what you want him to do, then I can see why he would get maybe a little bit buried after that, or they kind of push him in this other direction and go we're asking you to do this thing, please do it so it fits with kind of all the other things that we're doing.
You know what? I can respect that. I know what you mean, and I think it's this weird balance, right? Because in today's WWE, you're told you got to get yourself over and take a chance and this and that, blah 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 blah.
Right.
And I imagine in his head, he saw the momentum, he heard the cheers, and he thinks, if I play up to this, maybe I can make it into a thing. But you're right. I guess you're always fighting the power, and you're always fighting. What the storyline is. You're always fighting management, right? You can't beat management.
Right.
But I don't know. It's hard. It's so hard in modern day WWE because you're right. On one stage, you think, does he have to take the advantage to try and make himself get over more, which he tried, and it clearly didn't work, as sad as I am to say that. But on the other hand, what do you do from a booking standpoint? So I do see what you're saying. I think. Oh, I don't know. The whole situation with Rusev is so complicated. I don't know what they think of him. I don't know if they think he's a potential main eventer. Because everything until WrestleMania, was it 31? When he came out on a tank, which is still my favorite. Everything up to that point was great. And then he lost his US title to John Cena. I think it was US title he had. He lost his undefeated streak. And ever since then, I've always felt like he never found his place.
Right.
I liked him anyway, but I really got into him during that awful storyline he had with Dolph Ziggler and Summer Rae, simply because no matter what crap they gave him, he made me laugh. And I was like, that is a surefire sign of a performer. But you're right, if you've been told by somebody, this is what you want you to do, and you try and maybe 15, 20 years ago it would have worked, but in 2018, as we know, it's not the dream.
Yeah, well, you can end up doing, and I know you don't like this term, and I'm not a big fan of it either, but organically, he would have been turned to face. But he still does all his heel stuff. He follows kind of the framework he's been given, and then management's forced to flip him because the fans aren't buying it. But he's doing his part. It's similar to what Becky Lynch is doing. She's still trying to play the heel, but she's getting cheered, but she's still trying.
Yeah.
And to me, I can see at some point the roles reversing, and hopefully we get Charlotte heel again.
I hope they do a double turn at Hell in a Cell. I think everything is set up. I think it would be fun, and I think actually helps Charlotte. I think she's a better heel than she is a face anyway. So
I think she's among the best heels in the company.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And that's not best female heel. That's like best heels.
Yeah, I think she's
good.
She's got that natural. I'm going to make you not like me skill, whatever that may be.
Yes.
She's like Randy Orton in that sense. I just want to hate Randy Orton. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And The Miz, all those kind of people that tick those boxes. Although I respect Charlotte as an athlete. That's the only problem. She's so good in the ring. Sometimes it is hard to boo her. So I kind of understand that too.
Yeah, but then you have this heel who can't be beaten as well. So it's kind of I like that dynamic where she's just better than everybody else. And she's bad, and she knows it. And it was similar to like Asuka in NXT. She's better than everybody else. She knows it, and she's going to throw it in your face. And then when somebody climbs that mountain and knocks her off, it's a big deal.
I mean, I'd like that storyline. There's no two ways about it. Right, Dan, before I do let you go, there's obviously the big question I always have to ask everybody. It's the most generic question ever, but it always opens up some kind of fascinating debate. Favorite wrestler ever? Now, no one has one, but who is the first person that springs to your mind when that question is asked?
The first person that comes to mind is Kurt Hennig.
What? Dude, yes! No one ever says Kurt Hennig. I like it. I love Mr. Perfect, even more so because the other day that GIF was circulating Twitter when he throws the towel and Bobby Heenan catches it. I mean, there's loads of them, but oh man, it's just the best. Kurt Hennig to me is one of those guys that was even though everyone knew how good he was, in terms of how he was presented to the audience, massively underrated.
Yes. I remember Kurt Hennig from AWA. He was AWA champion when I kind of got into wrestling at that point. So he was the champion, and then there was like people like Rick Martel was another one in AWA. So those kind of my favorites back then. Jake Roberts was another. I love Jake Roberts, and I think it was as much as I was a person who I like snakes, so that was kind of natural.
It would be that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, but in different eras I've kind of went towards different wrestlers, and they're probably very similar because I really enjoyed Edge and Raven. I loved Raven, WCW Raven, where he'd sit in the corner.
Untapped potential again, I think.
Yeah, he was like Ethan Hawke from whatever mid-90s movies where he was just brooding, and that was the character. It's like what? And then today, like Seth Rollins and Finn Balor, Johnny Gargano, the Velveteen Dream is another one I think is going to be a huge star.
I do, yeah. He's like a throwback, isn't he? What did you think of Kurt Hennig when he got WWE'd, in the sense that he turns up in WWE, he's now Mr. Perfect? I mean, the character is still great. I think that's during the time when the vignettes are awesome and fun, and you can't help but laugh at it. But he's still Mr. Perfect. He's still a gimmick. Did you care about that, or you're like, it doesn't matter because he's making it work?
No, I loved it. I like gimmicks. Yeah, I don't need to have. I don't like the generic babyface kind of from some of the old days where it's like, I'm just going to be the best and slap your hands, and then they just wore tights and they had like no personality.
Yeah.
I like that personality with Kurt Hennig. So I used to play like the WWE video game. That's the old in like the arcades.
Oh,
and
man,
I was always
the best.
I was always Kurt Hennig.
Oh man, I love that game. I love that game
and it's
so
just
much. Wow.
Yeah, so there's probably the first one that comes to mind for sure.
That's brilliant. I mean, it's the same with Rick Martel as well. I think Rick Martel got dealt kind of a bad hand in WWE, and he was great, but I like Rick Martel so much that I kind of went and found his non-model stuff, and the model Rick Martel kind of hampered him a little bit because the gimmick was so stupid. You couldn't really like he was. He was an AWA guy, wasn't he? I think I'm right in saying.
Yeah, he was an AWA guy, and in our local indie promotion, and like Uber face, him and Dino Bravo at the time. They were the top faces. They were the ultimate good guys.
Yeah, no, they were. And then you gave him that. I like the model gimmick, but it gave him a ceiling. That was the problem. It gave him a ceiling, and I actually think he was better than the ceiling he got given. That was always my thing. But great answer. My favourite answer so far. I like that, Mr. Hennig. Rest in peace. What What an absolute hero that man was.
Yeah.
Cool. Right, look at that. We just smashed through an hour, which I always say I like to keep these to. I could chat to you all day, Dan, which is fantastic, to be honest. I just love anyone that's got that kind of retro insight is like an encyclopedia to me. I think it's just wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to do this again sometime.
Ah, dude, yeah.
So,
I usually say this off the air, but we'll say it on it as well. If you are a patron and you come on Simon's Pro Wrestling Podcast, again, patreon.com/Simon316. Hopefully you're happy to stay around and we can do this. I always like to plan in sort of one every 6 weeks or something like that, whatever works for the other person. So yes, Dan, please come on. And obviously if you are a patron and you haven't come back on, get in touch. It would be great to have these constant conversations and, find out what passions you have. And then if an event comes, we can talk about it. I think, that's kind of the best thing to do. Is there any kind of plugging or social media you want to throw out there? Don't have to, but I always like to offer the opportunity.
No, I don't think I have anything to plug or social media. So,
well, there we go. Nice and easy. Well, thank you to yourself, cool. Dan, and thank you to Brad as well. Who I love it. You can't argue with kids. You just can't because all their whole thought process comes from instincts and feelings. And really, if we all did that rather than overthought things, it would be a lot better. That's just my opinion on it, anyway.
Yeah.
As always, if you are on iTunes, please give us 5 stars, give us a review. Again, patreon.com/Simon316. This will also be on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/The Miller Report Rules. And there's a lot of other nonsense on there as well, such as game stuff. And I'm doing a playthrough of Spider-Man on the PS4, all kind of nonsense like that. Join the Facebook group. Just search for Simon Miller's Pro Wrestling Facebook. No, don't search for that. Simon Miller's Pro Wrestling Podcast on Facebook. And I'm on Twitter at SimonMiller316 and Instagram at SimonMiller316. Dan, I just want to thank you for that. It was a really good chat. I enjoyed myself immensely.
All right, thanks. It was a lot of fun.
No problem.
Hour goes by really fast.
I mean, doesn't it just? I usually cut most people off because you're like, where the hell did that go?
Yeah.
But definitely stay in touch. We'll do this again. And thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you for letting me into your life. And I'm going to chat to you again next week.